The room was quiet. Too quiet. Only the ticking of the wall clock broke the silence as a thick brown envelope was pushed toward me across the table. "Sign it," my future mother-in-law said coldly, without looking at my face. My hand started to shake when I opened the envelope. Inside was a prenup. Not just any prenup. It said I would leave the marriage with nothing if it ever ended. No house. No money. No support. Nothing. This was happening one night before my wedding. My wedding dress was hanging in the next room. Guests had already traveled from far places. And now, 3 people stared at me like judges in a courtroom. I looked at my fiancé, Daniel, hoping he would speak. He didn't. My heart dropped. But what none of them knew was that while my hand was shaking on the pen, my mind was already making a quiet decision. I smiled softly and said, "Okay, I'll sign." And that was the moment karma quietly booked a seat. Before we go on, comment where you're watching from and hit the like button if you've ever faced family pressure like this. But as the ink touched the paper, something unexpected happened. Something that would change all our lives forever. Let me take you back. My name is Amara. I grew up in a small town with big dreams. My parents were not rich, but they were kind. They taught me to work hard, speak the truth, and never beg for love. I met Daniel 3 years earlier at a friend's birthday party. He was gentle, soft-spoken, the kind of man who listened when you talked. He wasn't loud like his family. Daniel came from a wealthy home. Big house, big cars, big last name. At first, his family smiled at me. They called me sweet girl. They said I was humble. But the closer the wedding came, the colder they became. His sister, Lydia, always watched me like I was a thief. His mother, Mrs. Blackwood, asked strange questions like, "How much does your father earn? Have you ever owned property? What will you bring into this marriage?" I felt small every time. Daniel noticed, but whenever I spoke up, he said, "They're just being careful. Don't worry." I wanted to believe him. The night before the wedding, I was called into the family sitting room. Daniel's father, Mr. Blackwood, sat at the head of the table. His mother sat beside him. Lydia stood near the window with her arms crossed. Daniel sat next to me. That's when the envelope appeared. Mrs. Blackwood said, "This is just a formality." Mr. Blackwood added, "We've worked too hard for our wealth to lose it." Lydia laughed and said, "Let's be honest. We don't know what kind of women people pretend to be these days." That one sentence cut me deep. I turned to Daniel. "Did you know about this?" I asked softly. He avoided my eyes. That silence hurt more than their words. Mrs. Blackwood leaned forward. "If you have good intentions, signing shouldn't be a problem." I felt trapped. If I refused, the wedding could be canceled. People would blame me. My parents would be embarrassed. If I signed, I would be entering a marriage already seen as a risk. My heart felt heavy. But then I remembered something my father always said. Sometimes silence is not weakness. It is preparation. I took the pen. They all relaxed. They thought they had won. I read every line carefully. I noticed something strange. The document focused only on their wealth. It said nothing about my future. Nothing about what I owned. Nothing about what I might become. I signed. Mrs. Blackwood smiled for the first time that night. Lydia clapped slowly. Daniel finally looked at me and whispered, "Thank you for understanding." But inside, I felt something break. Not loudly. Quietly. The next day was beautiful. White flowers everywhere. Soft music. Guests smiling. From the outside, I looked like the happiest bride alive. But inside, I felt like I had walked into something blindfolded. As I stood at the altar, Daniel held my hands. His palms were warm. When he said, "I do," his voice shook. For a moment, I almost forgot everything. Almost. After the wedding, things changed quickly. Daniel's family reminded me often. "Remember where you came from. Be grateful. You're lucky." I wasn't allowed to help with business talks. I wasn't included in family decisions. I was treated like a guest in my own marriage. But I stayed calm. I listened. I watched. And I started planning quietly. What Daniel's family didn't know was this. Before marriage, I had been working on something of my own. A small idea. A quiet project. Something I never talked about because no one ever asked. Something that did not exist on that prenup paper. And as days passed, that small idea started to grow faster than anyone expected. One evening, I got a phone call. The caller said words that made my heart race. "Amara, we're ready to move forward. This could change everything." At that exact moment, I heard Mrs. Blackwood's voice from the hallway saying, "She signed. She's secured. She has nowhere to go." I smiled, because karma had already entered the room. I ended the call and turned around. Daniel stood behind me. He had heard everything. His face was pale. "Amara," he said slowly. "What did that call mean?" I looked at him, and for the first time since signing that paper, I didn't answer immediately, because the next words I spoke could change our marriage forever. Daniel's question stayed between us like a heavy cloud. "What did that call mean?" he asked again, softer this time. I could hear his breathing, that I could see fear hiding behind his eyes. I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because for the first time, I wanted him to feel what I had felt the night before our wedding. That silence. I finally said, "It was work." He frowned. "Work? You quit your job?" I nodded slowly. "Yes. I quit one job. I didn't quit my life." Before he could ask more, his mother's voice came from the sitting room. "Amara, come here." The tone wasn't kind. When I entered the sitting room, the whole family was there again. Just like the night of the prenup. Same chairs, same faces, same cold air. Mrs. Blackwood looked at me and said, "Daniel tells us you're still doing business." I blinked. I never said I wasn't. Lydia laughed. "With what money? Or should I say, whose money?" Everyone looked at me. I smiled politely. "It's mine." Mr. Blackwood leaned forward. "Be careful with your words." That's when Daniel spoke. "Mom, Dad, what is going on?" Mrs. Blackwood waved her hand. "We just want to be sure nothing strange is happening in this house." I wanted to scream. Instead, I stayed calm. "I think it's strange," I said gently, "that I was asked to sign a paper because you didn't trust me. But now you want to know everything I'm doing." The room went quiet. Daniel looked shocked. Lydia rolled her eyes. "Don't twist things." I continued. "I signed the prenup. I respected your fears. Now respect my privacy." Mrs. Blackwood stood up. "This is our house." I nodded. "Yes. And I am Daniel's wife." Daniel swallowed hard. He had never seen me speak like that before. That night, Daniel followed me into the bedroom. "Why didn't you tell me about this project?" he asked. I sat on the bed. Because every time I tried to speak in this family, I was reminded that I had nothing. "That's not true," he said quickly. I looked at him. "Then why did you let them make me sign that paper alone?" He had no answer. That silence again. Let me tell you what I never told them. Months before the wedding, I had started a small online service. Nothing fancy. Just an idea to help small businesses organize their work better. At first, it was slow. Then people started calling. Then companies started asking questions. I never mentioned it because every time wealth came up, I was treated like I didn't belong. So I kept quiet. And I grew quietly too. 2 days later, I got another call. This time, Daniel was in the room. "Amara," the voice said, excited. "We want to invest. Properly. Big money." Daniel's eyes widened. I covered the phone and looked at him. This is what the first call meant. He sat down slowly. "How big?" he asked. I answered softly, "Big enough." Unfortunately, Lydia was passing by the door. She stopped. She listened. And 5 minutes later, the whole house knew. Dinner that night felt like a battlefield. Mr. Blackwood cleared his throat. "So, we hear congratulations are in order." I nodded politely. Mrs. Blackwood smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, since you're married into this family, we should guide you." Guide. That word again. She continued, "You'll need advice. Protection. Legal support." I froze. Daniel looked at me, confused. Then his mother said the words that changed everything. "We should update the prenup." My heart skipped. "Update it how?" I asked. Mrs. Blackwood replied calmly, "To include whatever business you're building." Daniel jumped up. "Mom, that's not fair." Lydia snapped. "She can't suddenly get rich and pretend this family doesn't exist." I stood up slowly. Every eye was on me. I spoke clearly. "The prenup you gave me was very clear," I said. "What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours." Mr. Blackwood frowned. "That wasn't the spirit." I smiled. "But it was the paper." The room exploded with voices. Daniel looked torn. His family looked angry. And then Mr. Blackwood said quietly, "If you refuse, this marriage will face serious problems." I looked at Daniel. He had to choose. Me or the family that never trusted me. And he opened his mouth to speak. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Daniel looked at his parents. Then he looked at me. His mouth opened. He started. Mrs. Blackwood held her breath. Lydia leaned forward, ready to smile. Daniel swallowed hard. I think everyone should calm down, he said. That was it. No choosing.no standing up.no protection. Just balance, just peace. And in that moment, I felt something crack inside me. Later that night, I sat alone on the balcony. The city lights were bright, but I felt very small. Daniel joined me quietly. I'm under pressure, he said. They're my parents. I nodded. And I was your bride when they pushed that paper at me. He sighed. I didn't know what to do. I looked at him. You chose not to choose. That hurt him. I could see it. But it hurt me more. The next morning, I went out early. I had meetings, real meetings. People who listened when I spoke. People who respected my ideas. By afternoon, the deal was almost done. Papers were ready. Numbers were discussed. I was scared but excited. For the first time in a long while, I felt powerful in my own quiet way. When I signed the business agreement, my hands shook. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was growth. The investor smiled and said, Amara, this will change your life. I smiled back. He didn't even know how true that was. I came home late. Too late. The sitting room lights were on. Everyone was waiting. Mrs. Blackwood stood up slowly. Where have you been? I answered calmly, working. Mr. Blackwood said sharply, You signed something today. I paused. Yes. Lydia shouted, Without telling us? I laughed softly. That sounds familiar. Daniel looked confused. What did you sign? I turned to him. A deal. Mrs. Blackwood's face changed. Any business you do affects this family. I shook my head. No. The prenup says otherwise. Silence. The words came back to bite them. Mr. Blackwood stood up angrily. You're being disrespectful. I stayed calm. No. I'm being prepared. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Please, he said, don't let this destroy us. I touched his hand. I didn't start this. He looked away. And I realized something painful. Daniel loved me. But he was afraid of losing his family more than losing me. 2 days later, I got a message. Short, clear. We need to talk. Urgently, it's about the prenup. And what your husband's family didn't tell you. My heart raced. I checked the sender's name. It was the lawyer who prepared the prenup. The same document that was meant to control me. I locked my phone and stood up slowly. Because whatever he was about to reveal would shake this family to its core. As I walked back into the house, I heard Mrs. Blackwood say, she should remember her place. I smiled quietly. Because by morning, everything was about to change. I sat across from the lawyer the next morning. His office smelled like paper and old books. He didn't smile. Amara, he said slowly, that prenup was never meant to protect only your husband's family. My chest tightened. What do you mean? I asked. He leaned forward. There is a clause, he said, tapping the file, one they never explained to you. My heart started beating fast. He opened the document and pointed. In simple words, he said, if you build wealth on your own after marriage, and if your husband or his family interferes or tries to control it, the agreement becomes weak. I blinked. Weak how? He looked me straight in the eyes. They could lose the protection they thought they had. I felt dizzy. All this time, they thought the paper trapped me. But the paper had rules for them too. Rules they never read carefully. So what happens now? I asked. The lawyer closed the file. That depends on what they do next. I stood up slowly. For the first time since that wedding eve, I felt calm. Not angry, not scared. Calm. When I got home, the house was loud. Voices everywhere. Mrs. Blackwood was shouting on the phone. Lydia was pacing. Mr. Blackwood kept checking his watch. Daniel ran to me. Where have you been? He asked. Learning, I replied. Mrs. Blackwood turned sharply. Learning what? She snapped. I looked at her and said gently, that not all papers favor the loudest voice. She froze. That evening, Mr. Blackwood made an announcement. As long as you live under this roof, he said, all major financial decisions will go through us. Daniel nodded slowly. I didn't. I stood up. I won't be doing that, I said calmly. Lydia laughed. You don't have a choice. I smiled. I do. Later that night, Daniel sat on the bed, holding his head. They're threatening to cut me off, he said. I sat beside him. And what do you want? I asked. He was quiet for a long time. I don't know, he whispered. That answer hurt more than any insult. The next morning, I got another call. This time, it wasn't the lawyer. It was one of Daniel's uncles. The one nobody talked about. He said quietly, "Be careful that you're not the first woman this family tried to control." My stomach dropped. "There are stories," he continued, "stories they buried." Before I could ask more, the call ended. I looked up to see Mrs. Blackwood standing at the doorway. She was smiling, but her eyes were shaking. And she said softly, "You should stop digging before you regret it." I held my phone tightly, because now I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer just about a prenup. It was about secrets. And once secrets start coming out, nothing ever stays the same. Mrs. Blackwood's smile stayed on her face as she walked away. But I saw it. Fear. Not anger, not pride. Fear. That night, I couldn't sleep. The uncle's words kept playing in my head. "You're not the first woman. How many came before me? What happened to them?" I turned and saw Daniel sleeping beside me, peaceful, unaware. And for the first time, I wondered something painful. Did I really know the man I married? The next day, as I prepared to leave for another meeting, a house staff quietly stopped me. "Madam," she whispered, looking around, "please be careful." My heart skipped. "Careful of what?" I asked. She shook her head quickly. "I shouldn't talk." And she walked away fast. That was when I knew. Something was very wrong in this house. That evening, the uncle called again. "I can't speak long," he said. "They monitor everything." My hands shook. "Tell me," I begged. He sighed. "Your husband's mother forced 3 women out of this family before you. Each one was made to look greedy. Each one signed papers. Each one left with shame." My chest tightened. "What happened to them?" He paused. "One fought back," he said. "And after that, she disappeared from the family history." The call went dead. I walked straight into the sitting room. Mrs. Blackwood was there alone. I stood in front of her. "You've done this before," I said. Her hand trembled slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about," she replied. "You break women quietly," I continued. "With smiles. With papers. With fear." She stood up. "You should be grateful," she hissed. "We gave you a name." I shook my head. "No. You tried to take my voice." Daniel stood at the doorway. He had heard everything. "Mom," he asked, confused. "What is she talking about?" Mrs. Blackwood turned quickly. "Your wife is tired," she said. "She's imagining things." I looked at Daniel. "Ask about the women before me," I said softly. His face changed. That night, Daniel went to his father. Voices were raised, doors were slammed. For the first time, the family was not united. For the first time, their control was cracking. Late at night, I received a message from an unknown number. "Stop asking questions, or you'll lose more than your marriage." I froze. I looked up. Daniel was standing in the doorway, holding his phone too. He whispered, "I just got the same message." Our eyes met. And in that moment, we both realized something terrifying. This family didn't just use words and papers. They used fear. Daniel held up his phone with shaking hands. The message on his screen was the same as mine. "Stop asking questions, or you'll lose more than your marriage." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel whispered, "Who would threaten their own son?" That question changed everything. Because fear feels different when it finally reaches the wrong person. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed and buried his face in his hands. "My whole life," he said quietly. "I thought this was normal control. Silence. Obedience." I sat beside him. "They raised you this way," I said softly. "But you're grown now." He looked up at me, eyes red. "I'm scared," he admitted. That was the first honest thing he had said since we married. That night, I packed a small bag. Daniel watched silently. "Are you leaving me?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm leaving fear." We walked out of that big house before sunrise. No shouting no goodbye. Just quiet steps and heavy hearts. We stayed in a small hotel. Nothing fancy. But for the first time, the air felt light. Daniel slept deeply. I didn't. My phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls, messages. From Lydia, from Mr. Blackwood. None from Mrs. Blackwood. That silence scared me the most. By morning, the lawyer called again. "You did the right thing by leaving," he said. "But listen carefully." I held my breath. "When powerful families lose control," he continued, "they don't give up easily." Daniel listened closely. "What should we do?" he asked. The lawyer paused. "Prepare." That afternoon, the news hit us like a storm. Daniel's bank card stopped working. His phone line was cut. His father had frozen everything. "They're cutting me off," Daniel said, stunned. I took his hand. "They think you'll crawl back." Daniel looked at me slowly. "But I won't." That was the strongest I had ever heard him sound. By evening, rumors started spreading. Social media posts, family friends calling. They were saying I was controlling Daniel, that I married him for money, that I turned him against his parents. The same story, every time. Daniel stared at his phone. "They're destroying you," he whispered. I looked at him calmly. "No," I said. "They're exposing themselves." Just when things felt darkest, someone knocked on our hotel door. It was the uncle, the forgotten one. "I warned you," he said gently. "But now I'll help you." He handed us a folder. Inside were documents, old letters, proof. "Your mother hid a lot," he told Daniel. "And now it's time you see it." Daniel's hands shook as he opened the file. "What is all this?" he asked. The uncle answered quietly. "The truth your family buried." As Daniel read through the papers, his face went pale. He looked up at me slowly and said, "Amara, everything they told me about my family was a lie." And at that exact moment, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a name I never expected to see. Mrs. Blackwood. I stared at the phone. Mrs. Blackwood. Daniel looked at me, eyes wide. "Answer it," he said quietly. I took a deep breath and picked up. "Amara," she said softly, almost sweet, "come home. We need to talk." Home. That word made my stomach turn. "I'm listening," I replied. Her voice dropped. "You're tearing my family apart." I closed my eyes. "No," I said calmly. "I just stopped being quiet." She sighed like a tired woman. "Daniel is suffering," she said. "He's my son. I carried him for 9 months." Daniel grabbed the phone from me. "Mom," he said firmly, "you cut me off. You threatened my wife." Silence. Then she said something shocking. "If she leaves you," Mrs. Blackwood whispered, "everything goes back to normal." Daniel's hand started shaking. He handed the phone back to me. I spoke clearly. "I am not your enemy," I said. "But I will not be controlled." She laughed softly. "You think you're strong now." "I don't think," I replied. "I know." I ended the call. Daniel finally opened the uncle's folder fully. Letters fell out. Court papers, old emails. One name kept appearing again and again. Rachel. "Who is Rachel?" I asked. Daniel swallowed hard. "She was my cousin's wife," he said. "They said she ran away with another man." The uncle shook his head slowly. "She didn't run," he said. "She was pushed." The uncle explained everything. Rachel had started a business too. She was smart. Independent. Mrs. Blackwood didn't like that. Papers were signed. Rumors were spread. Pressure was applied. Rachel left the family broken. Daniel covered his mouth. "This is a pattern," he whispered. I nodded. "And they tried it with me." Daniel stood up suddenly. "I let this happen," he said, his voice breaking. "I watched them hurt you." Tears filled his eyes. "I'm sorry." I stood in front of him. "I don't need perfection," I said softly. "I need courage." He nodded slowly. "I choose you," he said, "even if it costs me everything." That night, Daniel made a call. Not to his parents. To the lawyer. "We're ready," Daniel said firmly. "To protect ourselves." The uncle smiled quietly. "Good," he said. "Because once you stand up to them, they'll panic." Just before midnight, another message came in. Not a threat. An invitation. Family meeting. Tomorrow morning. Attendance is not optional. The sender? Mr. Blackwood. Daniel looked at me. "They're planning something," he said. I squeezed his hand. "So are we." Because this time, we were not walking in blind. The next morning felt heavy. The sky was gray. The air was silent. Daniel and I sat in the car outside the Blackwood house. Neither of us moved. "This is where everything began," Daniel whispered. "And where it can change," I replied. We stepped out together. For the first time, we didn't walk in separately. The sitting room was full. Mr. Blackwood sat at the center. Mrs. Blackwood beside him. Lydia stood with her arms crossed. Everyone looked calm. Too calm. "You came," Mr. Blackwood said. "Good." Daniel nodded. "We're listening." Mrs. Blackwood smiled. "We just want peace." I almost laughed. Mr. Blackwood slid a new document across the table. "This will solve everything," he said. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" I asked. "A revised agreement," he replied. "For unity." Daniel frowned. "Another paper?" Mrs. Blackwood leaned forward. This one protects everyone. I finally picked it up. And my heart skipped. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. I placed the document back on the table. I won't sign this, I said calmly. Lydia scoffed. You don't have a choice. Daniel stood up. Yes, she does, he said firmly. The room froze. Mr. Blackwood's eyes widened. Sit down, he ordered. Daniel didn't. Mrs. Blackwood's voice dropped. If you walk away, she said slowly, you walk away from this family forever. Daniel took a deep breath. I already did, he said. Silence. Heavy, sharp. Just then the door opened. Everyone turned. A woman walked in. Tall, calm, confident. Mrs. Blackwood's face went pale. The woman spoke softly but clearly. I think it's time the truth stopped hiding. I stared at her, my heart pounding, because I recognized her face from the documents. It was Rachel, the woman they said disappeared. Alive, standing, unafraid. Rachel looked straight at Mrs. Blackwood and said, You tried to erase me once, you won't erase her. Mrs. Blackwood's hands started shaking. And before anyone could speak, Rachel turned to me and asked, Are you ready to tell them everything? The room felt like it stopped breathing. All eyes were on Rachel. She took a slow step forward and looked at everyone, then at me. Yes, she said firmly. I'm ready. And she deserves the truth. Mrs. Blackwood stood up quickly. This is nonsense, she snapped. You were warned not to come back here. Rachel smiled calmly. You warned me to stay silent. I didn't listen then either. Daniel's voice shook. Rachel, what really happened to you? Rachel looked at him with sad eyes. I loved this family, she said. But they feared me. Rachel spoke slowly, using simple words. She explained how she married into the family with love, how she trusted them, how she signed papers she didn't fully understand. When I started doing well on my own, Rachel said, they changed. Rumors were spread. Her marriage was attacked. She was called greedy. Your mother told everyone I ran away, Rachel said, looking at Daniel. But I was pushed until I broke. Mrs. Blackwood shouted, Enough! But no one listened anymore. The uncle stepped forward and placed documents on the table. These are copies, he said. Letters. Records. Proof. Mr. Blackwood's face went pale. Daniel picked up one paper and read silently. Then he looked up, tears in his eyes. You did this to protect money? He asked. Mrs. Blackwood said nothing. Her silence confessed everything. Daniel turned to his parents. All my life, he said quietly. You taught me family comes first. He laughed bitterly. But you destroy family when you can't control them. Mrs. Blackwood's voice cracked. We did it to protect you. Daniel shook his head. No, he said. You did it to protect power. I stepped forward. I signed the prenup because I was scared, I said. But I stayed quiet because I was smart. I looked straight at Mrs. Blackwood. You tried to trap me with paper, but paper can also free people. The lawyer, who had quietly entered the room, spoke up. Based on these documents, he said, any attempt to control or threaten Amara makes the prenup invalid. Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Blackwood sat down slowly. Daniel walked to my side and held my hand. I choose my wife, he said clearly. Not fear. Not control. Rachel smiled. The uncle nodded. Mr. Blackwood looked old suddenly. No shouting followed, because power had finally slipped from their hands. Weeks later, Daniel and I moved into our own place. Small, peaceful, free. Rachel started working with me. Strong women building something honest. The Blackwood family stopped calling. Not because they forgave us, but because the truth was louder than their name. I learned something important. Sometimes karma doesn't shout. Sometimes it waits. And when it comes with truth. Thank you for watching till the end. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth, like this video, and share it with someone who needs this message today.